Yes, today we have a treat. We have an interview, but not just any interview. We are going to be talking to a psychologist, but not just any psychologist. His background is Australian. He's also got Chinese roots, but he lives in Salt Lake City. Welcome again to another episode of the 1% in Recovery podcast, where we encourage you to laugh every day. To work hard in recovery, work hard in relationships, work hard in your business, job, school, just work. And to love unconditionally. Put much more love out there and watch much more love return to you. Because we always say recovery is beautiful, your EQ is your IQ, and you cannot outthink an emotional issue. So what we encourage people to do is go to the website, lifeiswonderful.love, Love, download the free, I repeat, the free Recovery Growth Scorecard. It's a scorecard where you can keep track of natural dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins, all those natural hormones to change the neuroplasticity in your brain to start healing as you begin this beautiful road of recovery. Now, help me welcome Dr. Michael Zhang. How are you feeling today, Doctor?
Hello, everybody. I'm feeling great today. Very excited to be with you, Hugo.
Excellent. Well, let's start off. Tell the audience one thing you love.
I love the Karate Kid movies. I'm sure everyone listening to this has seen at least one of them and has great memories of it. And the beauty of those movies, and now with a lot of the remakes and the reboots and the continuations, is in recent years they made a whole series called Cobra Kai, which picked up decades after the Karate Kid, and it was just so much fun, so much nostalgia. I loved it so much, and it's my favorite universe, the Karate Kid Cobra Kai universe.
Yeah, when Karate Kid came out, I was in high school. I always tell people I'm 59. I was in high school and college in the 80s. I also say 80s had the best music. But everyone always remembers wax on, wax off. I remember everyone could say that line and block it.
Yeah. I tell you what, I remember all of that, and just it's such an amazing experience for me. The Karate Kid, movies, and now the Cobra Kai series. I mean, just everything about it. I love it so much, Hugo.
Oh, great! I'm glad you do. Well, let's jump into the questions. Question 1. You posted something really intriguing on LinkedIn about prediction markets and sports betting. Because what people don't realize that they're finally trying to understand sports betting, and sports betting is constantly evolving because the gambling industry is always trying to maximize how many bets can be made per hour. So that's why all the micro betting, the live betting was added to the games, the totals, the prop betting. But now, because prediction markets comes from a different angle, especially from a regulatory angle, about exchanges, you posted something very significant that prediction markets, the way they work, they attack the brain or the gambler in a different way. Explain some of the similarities and some of the differences and why it's the new, I guess, gem of the gambling industry, and why even DraftKings FanDuel has their own division of prediction markets, because they see it as either the future or at least a part of the future.
It's pretty brilliant, actually, the whole existence of prediction markets, because on the surface, prediction markets and sports betting, they look very similar. Some would even say there's like identical elements within them. You've got the money wagered on uncertain outcomes, the win or lose factor. But underneath it, like they've also been framed quite differently. And I so appreciate that question, because I think what a lot of people miss is that prediction markets, like, they're not really replacing gambling. It's more like they've absorbed gambling, and the new framing is very unique in some ways. So a lot of people, they may think they're doing something new when they trade on the platforms like Kalshi or Polymarket. In fact, one of our users on our app just recent. I should say what our app is. Incumental. I'm the founder of a guided recovery support app for gambling and prediction markets called Incumental. So one of our users was just telling me this very thing, that, hey, I'm getting over the gambling, but then this thing, prediction markets, has come into the picture, and it's engaging me in a different way now, and I'm not seeing it quite like gambling. So just getting into it. So what I believe, actually, as I've kind of deconstructed the prediction markets, is that really what we have inside of them is still gambling, but four gambling systems at once. So I would love to walk through my
Yeah.
analysis of these
Yeah.
four
Do it.
systems, because I think, like, once you see them, you can't unsee them. So let's kind of
Right.
break it down. The first one is very similar, right? It's with the sports book, the bookmaker model. So in this case, you still have fees, okay, spreads that are built into every transaction, every trade that's made on a prediction market. Difference is, you're not beating the house, you're paying the house, okay? So the edge, it's not like a house edge in the same way, but it's still there and it's structural, okay? And then the second is the parimutuel model. So this is where, we think about, how does horse racing work? We have odds that will shift based on, how the crowd is positioned. The more people that bet one way, the worse your return gets, and things like
Right.
that. So
So
prediction
the odds are
markets,
always changing.
that's right. So prediction markets, same thing, but cleaner interface, okay? But the underlying dynamic, we have to recognize, is still there, okay? And the third gambling system is straight up casino exposure, we could say, okay? So you're still, as I mentioned earlier, you're still putting money on the uncertain outcomes. The probabilities in this case just feel more analytical, because it feels more like you're actually engaging in an investment, like you're trading, okay? And it's more calculated as a result. So then it's like, oh, it's like I've done my homework, okay? I've done my research into this, but at the end of the day, the uncertainty is still there. The outcome is unknown, and the losses that are experienced are still very real. So the fourth system that I think is really crucial in this whole piece, and maybe the biggest differentiator, is the poker dynamics. Okay, so here within prediction markets, you're winning directly from other participants, and that's what makes it unique compared to sports betting or sports books. Where you're up against quote unquote house. So in this case, it's about, like, who's better informed than you are. Okay, and in prediction markets, it's what we call the information asymmetry. Okay, that's the problem that we're dealing with, because then you've got maybe some who are advantaged with inside knowledge, who could profit in that way. I know that they're scrutinizing that a lot more these days, but still, that's a thing, and we've seen many examples of that already. Okay,
Well, we've seen that
um,
already with the government. I mean, with certain things about whether predictions around oil or bombings or this and that, where certain people had opened an account within 6 days and then they made $1
yeah,
million. I mean, there's a lot
yeah,
of that. It's no different when I always kind of laugh at the gambling industry when they talk about that with more regulation, with more legality, they'll be able to uncover that many more either scams or fixing. And I say, no, it actually encourages more
yeah,
because it's legal. And that's why we're constantly seeing, whether it's an NFL player or to this week, a college football quarterback had a gambling addiction, or
Mm.
before it was college baseball. I mean, it just takes a couple months, couple weeks, and there's always a new scandal being
Mm.
brought to light.
No, exactly, Hugo. And we think about the differences or the similarities between sports betting and prediction markets. I think something really important for people to understand is, at least currently, I'm pretty sure it's 90% or more of the contracts being traded on prediction markets are sports event contracts. So that will tell you something else about what's really going on. It's kind of, again, four systems of gambling bundled into one that appears more like a stock market, that appears more like we're actually investing and we're trading. And you think about the layers of deception that may go into this as well, and what makes it so much more dangerous, because it just appears so different, even though it's so similar at the same time. And the similarity, as we know, is ultimately this could become problematic for people who are engaging. They could lose a lot of money. This could become addictive. And as a result, they may suffer a lot because of what they're doing on the prediction market platforms.
Right, because I think, when I gambled, everything was gambling is gambling.
Mm.
The any industry, any of this gambling industry is they're very particular in the words they use. Because now they keep saying, well, gambling is fun, gambling is entertaining. But like what you said, the prediction markets, when you hand over, you're not technically placing a bet. You are buying a contract.
Yeah.
So that in turn changes how a person thinks of what they're risking.
Yeah.
This is a contract, no different than a contract on any type of future commodity, whether you're dealing with cotton or oil. And I think that changes how people view that because, like you says, I think one of the conversations that need to be had even now, probably even at the middle school level, we'll get that in question too, but at the
Mm.
high school and college level, that they're looking at whether it's prediction markets, gambling, or options or
Mm.
crypto, that it's all kind of, well, I'm investing, I'm not
Mm.
gambling,
Yeah.
and not
To,
realizing, call it what it is, it's still high risk.
to your point, there was this narrative before, for most of my life, right? Gambling is gambling, and those were your words. And now, gambling is not gambling in the same way. It doesn't feel the same. The messaging has evolved a lot, and moreover, it's not just that the messaging has evolved. Now, the identity of it has evolved too. It really is, the more I think about it, Hugo, like a beautiful deception that's going on, because now you've got people convinced, and they're probably telling themselves uh, 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 things like, "Hey, I'm forecasting. I'm not
Mhm.
gambling. I
Right.
I understand this market. This is different. This is not gambling. Come on. This is." And that may be true, like for some, okay? But I think that at the end of the day, the mechanisms, right? The mechanics of how the thing actually works, they don't care what you call it. They don't care how it's framed. And,
Right.
and, and ultimately, they just care that you're putting your money into that experience, and the system may make you feel that something that others don't, and there's like a real psychological hook there as well. Like it's
Right.
the hook of, hey, I may be right, like I feel good about that, and it's something that makes me want to engage more, because who doesn't love being right?
Exactly. Right. And if you really look at the history of the two people who started Kalshi, they came from the financial world.
Mm.
The financial world has been using prediction markets to make financial decisions
Mm.
for years, long before any of this call sheet poly market stuff actually came to existence. And that's where they actually initially got the idea. And we don't even realize how the financial industry has been placing a lot of they would call it maybe hedges, but they were either making hedges, forecasting bets. And then sometimes they'd win and sometimes they would lose big, and
Yeah.
then the world has to suffer.
So it really is, like, as I mentioned at the outset, pretty brilliant what they've done now, with the creation of these prediction market platforms. Because with sports betting, there's still this understanding, right? Even if it's normalized and socialized, and we can get into that more in the next topic. But even if that's all the case, at the end of the day, there's still this understanding this is gambling. Whereas with prediction markets, it really is sold as something else, right? Like the forecasting, the information, the almost like this collective intelligence, right? And that, I think that identity shift, like, it really does change how people experience what may be in the underlying sense the exact same behavior. Okay, and I think that is so interesting because if you okay if you if you take like we'll use the language of prediction markets, okay? If you take a position on a binary resolution outcome in a prediction market, you might be thinking, hey, I'm making a smart call. Like, I'm making a smart trade here. I mean, but again, same underlying behavior, but completely different identity.
I agree. Like I always tell people, even if you gamble, almost like any form of gambling, they always say, well, someone's got to win. Yeah, 1% wins,
Yeah,
99 lose. And I
yeah,
actually saw a different statistic. I don't know if this actually, I'd have to verify. Someone was talking about that out of, let's say, the 2 million accounts that Kalshi has, only like 780 of them are actually profitable accounts, which means less than one. If you put in 780 into 2 mil, that's
yeah,
less than 1% of actual consistent winning accounts on the platform, which is to me no different than sports betting, slots, poker, whatever
exactly.
it is. There's always going to be, the 90. I always say 99, but even if you went to 95% losers, and that's how you get into, do you have any opinion on the amount of actual winning accounts on any of the prediction markets?
That wouldn't surprise me at all, what you just said. I don't know the exact numbers, and but what I do know is it's directionally correct, and meaning like the extent of it in the direction of, hey, there's really not many winning accounts. I mean, we've known that across all forms of gambling, and why would that be any different when you look at prediction market platforms? Look at their valuations. Just, if anyone's listening to this, someone could be listening to this this year, they could be listening to this next year. Whenever they're listening to this, just go online and type in Kalshi. What is the valuation of Kalshi? What was it a year ago? Type in what's the valuation of Polymarket? What was it a year ago? And the only way you can explain those valuations and how incredible they are is by what you just said. Look at the number of winning accounts and look at how small they really are. And then that tells you the game that's being played at the end of the day.
Right, because they're going to back winners. So they're going to be able to raise money based on the fact that they know that they'll get their money back plus,
Mm,
plus the incentive. Well, let's go into question two. Question
mm.
two, you deal with a lot of young males. And a lot of people like to focus nowadays between the 18 and 24-year-old males. But now, because of all the statistics out there, that 51% of all 16-year-olds, males, 16-year-olds have placed a bet. We really need to be looking at males between the age of 12 and 25, middle school, high school, college, on how they're either viewing or how they interpret gambling, how they're getting in trouble. They may not be in like the old terms of pathological gambler like me, but
Mm.
they're for sure a problem gambler because they're getting into a lot of negative situations, whether it's credit cards, payday loans, getting money from their parents, trust, whatever it is. What are you seeing with this young population on how it's going to really impact where the US, because I know it's going to affect the rest of the world, but let's just focus on the US and where that's kind of headed with this population.
Mm. Let me say first that when it comes to prediction markets, sports books, okay, all the forms of gambling, we have to understand, and this is a message that I think needs to be reinforced to the fullest extent that we can. That the math is not neutral. Like over time, the structure of all these systems is designed so that the losses accumulate. And that doesn't mean you can't win in the short term, okay? Because you
Mhm.
absolutely can. And that's the hook.
Good.
And that's why people continue to be engaged when they focus on those experiences over the other experiences. But over time, we have to understand this fact, which is almost universal, with the exceptions of the winning accounts that you identified earlier, okay? The structure plays out. Okay. It's not because like anyone's doing anything wrong in particular when it comes to their own strategy of gambling or this and that, but it's because of how the thing's been designed and built. It's not some sort of a bug, like it's a feature of how these systems work. And I'm emphasizing this because so much of what happens when we get caught in the cycles of whether it's addiction or call it whatever we may want, okay, problem gambling. So much of that is the losing carries so much weight that is not perceived in the same way in the moments where the problem is taking place, in the moments where we're feeling the urge of wanting to gamble. Okay. So that to me, I think is a really important thing to just reinforce again, now that we have this opportunity, right? The system, yes, built into the system, it does allow enough winning to convince you that winning is sustainable when it really isn't. Okay, so I want
Right.
to, yeah,
Well, that's why they always give you free money.
yeah,
You know, deposit $5, we'll put in 50, we'll put in 200, whatever it is to me is no different when the heroin dealer says the first bag of heroin's free
mm,
because it's all designed to hook you. It's
mm,
all designed to get that little taste of heroin, the little taste of winning. I just
mm,
won free $200. I can do this again. I can go on a run. I know almost every compulsive gambler I ever met in recovery has the same story. I won my first bet at age 12, $5
mm,
bet back in 78 when $5 was a lot of money. Bet it on the
mm.
Cotton Bowl, UT against Notre Dame. I won that bet. And it changes your mind, especially at a young age, saying that I'm actually good at this. And there's nothing like when you people can get hooked onto that free money. It's just like a free drug. You get high.
Again, it's all a part of the design of the system, right? So we have
Right.
essentially now like a behavioral ecosystem that is really, when you think about it, it's shaping how an entire generation now is relating to risk, okay, or to reward, or to identity, or even to intimacy. Okay, I know that's something that we had discussed before the episode today. Like even when it comes to intimacy. So, and I think gambling, like, yeah, it's only like one part of that. And when we think about like young men in particular, okay, the reality is because of the normalization, the socialization, young men don't look like problem gamblers. You use the word pathological gambling before. Okay, that used to be more diagnostic terms under previous
Right.
classifications, but still, like uh, uh, problem gamble, whether you call it problem pathological, it just doesn't. A lot has changed in recent years. How this whole thing is framed and how it's all experienced now. So it's almost to me like gambling is fitting in quite perfectly and neatly into what we may call like the architecture of normal male life, right? You've got like sports betting, with the group chats. You've got poker nights, you've got fantasy leagues, you've got the casino trips, right? Like for a friend's birthday, and this stuff like doesn't really raise like red flags or anything just on the face of it. But I think that it can all like really lead to something else. And I think what makes it like so hard to catch, especially early, is the wins. They're the experiences that get shared, whereas the losses are the experiences that stay private when young men are gambling. And so when we think about like the social context of the gambling, it actually is providing, I believe, like a sort of cover, because it's so hard to differentiate, what gambling is problematic, what gambling is just gambling, or what gambling is not even gambling, like in the case of prediction markets. So I think that it's a
Well,
very
right. But also, I
yeah.
think it's changed now the addiction cycle. Because, way
Mm,
back when it was always the winning phase, the losing phase, the
mm,
desperation phase. And now, because everything is contracted, people are now looking for help much sooner. For me, it took
mm,
20 years. I
mm,
think now you're seeing people 2 years is enough because it's
mm,
so fast. People don't realize how fast gambling has evolved. The same
mm,
reason is people don't realize back in the days is they used to have 1 or 2 deck shoots in Vegas.
mm,
And now it's a 6, 7 day shoot. I mean, it's based on odds. The house has, it's a lot harder to to figure out either face cards or to count cards, but it speeds up the game. You don't have a
mm,
dealer there have to do a reshuffle. Everything
mm,
is based on speed. And what I like to, as before we go into question 3, you were talking here about pathological. I always like to refer to one of the best books that I read in recovery was from really the godfather of gambling recovery, Dr. Custard, When
mm,
Luck Runs Out. And, when he talked about bringing in, trying to get pathological gambling into the DSM in 1980, trying
mm,
to do all that information, people really have to start doing more homework. I always tell people, I talk to a lot of alcoholics too. You got to
mm,
understand the history of alcoholism, understand the history of recovery,
mm.
psychology to deal with this thing because it's not as simple as I'm no longer going to gamble or drink again. But
Yeah.
any any words before we go on to question 3?
Yeah, listen, on the topic of doing your homework, I did some homework for our episode today. Just so I want to make sure that the listeners had some idea, okay, about the scope of what's really going on here. So I'll just share some of my homework results. Okay, so basically when we look at the numbers now, okay, and these numbers are going to change, okay, probably pretty quickly. To your point, everything is changing so quickly in this landscape. And folks like us who are on the other side trying to help and support people, we simply can't keep up with what's going on the other side. So what we're seeing is something like 10% of men aged in that 18 to 30 range, they're showing signs of gambling problems already. That's more than 3 times what we're seeing in the general population rate. Okay, what was it? Nearly half of men, or about that, from 18 to 49, 50, like they have at least one sports book online account. Okay, and then it's starting a lot earlier than I think people even realize. To your point, Hugo, there was a survey that I saw. 65% of adults participated in some form of gambling before the age of 21. Okay, and I'm pretty sure, like in that early adult range, like 1/3 of them had placed a sports bet before turning 21. And also, to your point, that doesn't even include the adolescents, who we know we're seeing so many more instances of the adolescents who are getting into this through also the convergence of gaming and gambling,
Right.
who are showing early signs of problem gambling behavior. And the parents are just, what do I do? What's happened? How in the world did we get to this point? And that's just the world we're living in now. It's a really interesting picture when you think about, contrasted to your earliest gambling experiences and what the world was like back then to what we're dealing with now. Things have changed so dramatically, Hugo.
Yeah, but even people are actually cheering because there's been a drop in this country about alcohol consumption
Mm,
between the high school, the 20-year-olds. I go, but the drop in alcohol, but it's been replaced by the rise in gambling and the rise
mm,
in weed. You're
mm,
not eliminating people like all of a sudden they're no longer escaping their feelings or
right.
escaping their reality. They're just changing out, moving from alcohol to a little bit to weed, but much more so into the gambling. And
Oh,
there's still got the depression and the anxiety that's actually even gone up.
no, and I think there's a nuance there as well, because for people who are, including young men who are experiencing gambling problems, the binge drinking and alcohol is still very high. So when you look at the comorbidity there, it is
Mhm.
definitely still problematic, even though as a general trend, yeah, we may be seeing some of those shifts as well that you mentioned.
All right. So let's just jump in because we like to talk about solutions here.
Mm,
Question 3. You have this app,
mm,
designed to help people to understand gambling, to stop gambling, to get into recovery, to live a better
mm.
life. Talk some about incremental, but also talk about anything else that a young person, let's say even as young as middle school, high school, but also someone in college or in their 20s, what can they do early on? They can be effective to curtail or stop their gambling.
Thank you for mentioning the app, Hugo. It's something that we just launched a couple of months ago, and we're very excited about it because when I was practicing before as a psychologist in a clinical setting, it became very clear to me from my clients and from their experiences of the addiction and also of the recovery journeys that they had. It became clear to me what they needed that didn't exist. And they're the ones that actually really guided me to go on this journey of creating Incremental. And it's very exciting for me because, as I mentioned earlier, that we see what's happening on the gambling industry and system side, where this is just spiraling and it's just so everything is happening so quickly. On the other side of things, it's not happening so quickly. There's much more. There's friction is completely removed from the gambling side, but the friction on the recovery side, whether that's friction internally at a psychological level, whether that's friction just from the way the support system has been set up, and the way it currently exists, that's still there to a large extent. Even though, yeah, over time, especially with folks like us building platforms and apps and just trying to help people however we can, kind of outside of that system, we're doing what we can. But ultimately, like there's still more friction on our side of things. But I mean, before I even go much more into uh, what we offer in the app, I think it's important to identify, like, in terms of steps, right? I think there's a really key first step, and I'm sure it resonates with you and for any of the listeners who've experienced gambling problems. And that first step is honesty. And honesty is so important. It's so powerful. It's honesty with yourself. It's honesty with other people. Even in fact, dishonesty and mistrust, all these things are symptoms of the gambling itself. So for us to be able to overcome it, it really does start with honesty. I think historically, we've heard this narrative of, oh, just maybe if you just had more discipline or self-control or
Mhm.
willpower or this and that. That's not what we're
Mhm.
dealing with here. Okay. We're dealing with something when you look at the way the behavioral ecosystem that I referred to earlier, including gambling, but also including pornography and gaming and social media. I mean, this thing has been designed to essentially engineer these outcomes, and it's also been designed to train the brain a particular way. So, in order to really take that first step, I believe it's being honest, and
But
it's as easy as just talking to it, the difference. Just talking to one person, doesn't matter who it is, can make. It's incredible because gambling and these other addictions, they thrive in isolation. They love
right.
keeping you lonely, okay? And this is like this is the first step, I believe, to coming out of that and to counteracting that in a recovery journey.
Right. And I want to add one thing. I say all addiction makes a person lonely.
Mm,
But gambling will make a person the most loneliness out of all addicts because of the money and the
mm,
losses and the bank accounts or all the other obligations out there has to become even more secretive because
mm,
at some point the drug use and the alcohol becomes visible. The gambling creates more barriers to the loneliness. And what
mm.
I like about when you talk about honesty, and I think the key thing, people have to really be honest with themselves on what
Yes.
are the odds. To me, I always say, first thing is you got to understand 99% of all gamblers lose. Stop talking about the one woman in Arkansas who won $1.8 billion in Powerball on Christmas Eve. Yes,
Mm,
she was the one winner, but everybody else loses. And to me, is that honesty. You've got to understand you're not flipping a coin like in sports, because that's how I used to think. Well, you're technically flipping it's one way or the other. It's either Pittsburgh or it's Houston's going to win the football game. No,
mm,
it's a mathematical equation like we talked about earlier. Over time, you're going to lose because
mm,
the math is always going to be for the house, the sports book, the prediction market. Any
mm.
other tips besides getting honest?
Absolutely. So I would say first tip is honesty. Second tip is we talked about friction earlier, right? How it feels like there's not much friction when it comes to the design of gambling systems. And it's so easy to just get on the app and to place bets or to make trades and all of this. And they've taken out every way they can think of that would make your experience more friction driven. So for us, I think that an important second step is how do you add some more friction in there? How do you actually do that? And then, by the way, adding friction isn't a solution per se, but it's a step, right? It's something that can be
Mhm.
helpful because it
Yeah.
means it can give you the time and the space to do more of that deeper work that can help you overcome the urges of wanting to gamble. So some of the
Mhm.
friction may be deleting apps. You're like, oh, that doesn't work. Okay, how about Gamban? Gamban is something that Gamban is a software that can actually block gambling websites and gambling apps. So,
Right. Gambling,
how
also Bet Blocker. Yeah, there's a couple of them out there. Correct.
So, I mean, these sorts of steps, right? Like whether it's the blocking, whether it's, and again, I see the important role that it plays, but including self-exclusion. Okay,
Mhm.
I see the important role that it plays. While I also recognize, like, yes, we need that friction between yourself and that next bet, but ultimately, what we need is to give us that space and that distance so that we can work on understanding the urge, and that's where incremental, I think, plays a very important role because
Good.
in our app, what we try to do is to use our language, we try to break the urges. Okay, we try to disrupt them kind of in the moments that they're happening through some of our guided recovery sessions that are on demand, short form that correspond to urge cycles. Okay, so we try to do this in a very realistic, in the moment, real time way, and ultimately in the short term the results can be very effective for folks, especially because how many therapy, okay? I used to be a therapist. I used to, the 1 hour sessions and all of that. But that's 1 hour a week, right? And you think about other like Gamblers Anonymous, and I champion all of these approaches. I'm a big advocate of recovery optionality. I'm a big advocate of recovery personalization. Okay, like different things work for different people. Some people swear by Gamblers Anonymous. Some people say it doesn't work for them. I'm good with whatever works for you at the end of the day. But what's been missing, and these approaches can all be very helpful, but what's been missing and the gap that's been there that we're trying to fill is that in the moment support for people, and that in the long run, you can actually integrate our app with any of these other solutions, any of these other recovery options that work for you. Have it be a part of your journey and help you in those moments that you may need it, but also help you build your recovery experiences over time. That's something that we really focus on in our app and in our platform, Hugo.
Okay, excellent. Well, we've now delved into some really interesting, in-depth topics that I think people are always pushing. I'm always trying to push this envelope in this journey of recovery, especially now with the newfound toy called prediction markets, which everyone's trying to understand, as well as apps. I think that is part, especially now with AI, with all the other stuff that's being thrown out there, that people really, because ultimately what I try to get people to do is just to try to live the better life. And even though gambling and alcohol has been normalized, I always say, but you don't need it. Especially because it doesn't actually improve. The commercials are never reality. But with that, you will see everything in the show notes. You will see how to connect with Dr. Michael Zhang, how to download the app, and any other information, connect on LinkedIn, on ways to connect and move this conversation forward so you can live in freedom. With that, we will conclude this episode of the 1% in Recovery.